All right, good evening, fellow audiophiles. Welcome to live stream number 6, I think, of follow up to my podcast episodes. The room behind me is an absolute mess. Sorry about that. Look into my world of just audio gear everywhere all the time. All right. Let's see. So, tonight we are following up about how to navigate conflicts of interest in audio reviews. So, this was a podcast episode that released last Wednesday, which would have been November 12th, where Lachlan Fennon from Passion for Sound was again the guest. And it was a follow up to an episode we had done where we talked about conflicts of interest in audio reviews. And then in this most recent episode, we made the turn towards like, how do you, the viewers, navigate those? Like, what do you do about these conflicts of interest? And there's no easy answer to that all the time, obviously. Ace, good evening. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. I also see Hypostatic Studios became a member tonight. Thank you for joining. That's awesome. Which is a good reminder, like, subscribe, comment. I do offer channel memberships, which give you, benefits such as being able to talk to me on Discord, watching my videos early. There is member exclusive content out there now too, including just tonight. I released a first impressions video and unboxing video for the Jotunheim 3 headphone amp, which you actually see sitting right here. So yes, because of the extreme generosity of some of my members, I was able to, they donated the funds for a Jotunheim 3. So I was able to order and get one of those in here, and there it is. So yeah, a customers only video about first listening impressions got posted earlier tonight. So check that out. Let's see, who do we have here? Michael MKI233 says you don't buy the wrong color shit. You're right, I don't buy the wrong color shit. I buy the silver shit. Okay? As I keep telling people over and over again, if your shit is black, you either just had too much Pepto or you need to see a doctor. Okay? Those are the facts. That's just medical reality. All right, Paul is here. Thanks, Paul, for being here. He says, congrats on hitting 15K. Yes, just recently rolled over 15,000 subscribers. So that's a milestone. Happy about that. Thanks to all of you for your support. Obviously, I couldn't have done it without you. I mean, by definition, but I really do appreciate you all being out there. All right. Another note on the member exclusive content. Right after this live stream is done tonight, it just finished uploading. I didn't even get a chance to click the release button yet, but there will be a first impressions video for 4 new Hi-Fi Man headphones that are dropping. The Ananda Unveiled, the Audivina LE, the Edition XV, and the HE600. Hi-Fi Man sent me a care package with all 4 of those. Actually, you can kind of see them in the mess behind me on a table back there, because I really just got done filming that first impressions and editing that video together just a few minutes before I jumped on here for the live stream. So I will publish that right when this is done. All right. Let's see. So then back on track. In the follow-up to the podcast episode, there was a part in the episode where Lachlan and I discussed, cognitive psychology theory called dual process theory, about system 1 and system 2 in the brain, about how system 1 is the really rapid response system, and system 2 is the deeper thinking and very effortful system that is supposed to keep system 1 in check and doesn't always, right? And then I was doing some reading over the past week, and I remembered, I came across and was reminded about another theory that is out there. And that is this idea of thought terminating cliches. And what does this have to do with audio reviews, right? Like, I kind of want to talk about that here for a moment. Hey, the Reverend Doctor is here. Hello. Thanks for being here. All right. So what is a thought terminating cliche, for example? Well, this is like these are quick expressions that we humans often use and direct at each other that often have the effect of shutting down conversation rather than encouraging it. Like one example in everyday language would be, let's agree to disagree. Okay. That's a lot of times, well, like that, the use of a phrase like that is used in a situation where someone is kind of experiencing some cognitive dissonance or discomfort. And rather than engage with the intensity of the situation, they'll often just say, let's agree to disagree, in the hopes that that just kind of smooths things over and stops the conversation rather than moving it forward. Related to what Lachlan and I spoke about, and with audio reviews, I think there are a lot of expressions in in regards to like audio reviews and audio reviewing, or just within our audio hobby, that are essentially thought terminating cliches. All right. And here are some examples that I came up with, and maybe you have a few that you can put in the comments here. All right. Show me the frequency response graph. That's one that we hear a lot, right? And often I see that one pulled out like when someone makes the claim that they hear a difference between two things that someone else thinks that they shouldn't hear a difference between, right? That could be difference between DACs, difference between amps, difference between cables, okay, things of that nature. Where there's a lot of times that you'll see a discussion going back and forth, and you'll the person who claims to be pro science will say something like, well, show me on the frequency response graph where that is, when maybe, or maybe that thing isn't really a frequency domain question. Okay, maybe it just wouldn't show up there. Okay. That was, so that's one of those that will be like, like the use of that phrase is often meant to like shut down the conversation, and it's often the effect that it has. I see that Michael MKI says on here, if you haven't done a blind A/B test, okay, invoking that you need to do a blind test can be one of these thought terminating cliches. It's not always. And admittedly, in audio, a lot of these things get tricky. The blind test, or the double blind test idea being one of them, because blind testing is a valuable and important tool for determining whether or not there are actual differences between things, and not just in audio, in all kinds of different areas. Blind testing can be very useful in determining whether or not there are actual perceptible, there we go, differences between things. However, the way that it is often invoked in discourse in our hobby, it's more meant to shut down conversation than it is to actually engage with the issue. Right. I wrote a couple of others down. Like claiming placebo or bias is another one of those things. Now, placebo I've discussed before. I've talked about that with Cameron or Golden Sound. We're trying to use the term placebo in audio really is not scientifically appropriate. Okay. But so then that one definitely is often brought up as a way to shut down conversation, be a thought terminating cliche rather than actually engaging with the subject matter at hand. Claims of bias can be, again, that's like blind testing. That's tricky because biases are real. They do influence the way we perceive things for sure, but it often can also be used, or claims of bias can often also be used as a way to shut down conversation or not have to think about what's going on, rather than, again, engaging with whatever might be happening. So that was just something I came across in my reading in the week here since I spoke with Lachlan, and I thought that thought terminating cliche idea was interesting. It's something that we should consider in our audio hobby and might actually be like an example or one of the mechanisms by which our brains use our system one to just say, show me the frequency response graph. And then system two, which actually does deep thinking about that, never actually engages because we've thought terminated ourselves often when we make a statement like that. Okay. So that's a bit of spitballing and me thinking about this broader issue here to get this live stream going. I'm going to take a drink real quick and somebody ask me a good question in the chat there. And while we wait for a good question to come in, I will do this thing because I've been told by multiple sources that you need to remind people to like, subscribe, and comment and become a channel member. Okay. Or buy your individual videos on Patreon multiple times in each piece of content. So I'm going to say that again while we wait for the questions to come in. Now I'm doing Dead Space, which is something I really shouldn't do. All right, here we go. Did I get around to watching Lachlan's, we say misstep here with Final Tonalite? I have not gotten around to watching his Tonalite video. No, it was described to me. It would be unfair for me to comment because I really was unable to watch, though I understand that there is a little bit of question, maybe concern about how he handled. I can't remember if it was a sponsorship or a collab or what the issue is there. So no, I have been unable to check that out. I honestly have spent the last 3 days working really hard on getting new content out myself and haven't gotten around to listening to it. I will try to make a note of that though. I will say though that like that's one of those things where like knowing Lachlan and talking to him a lot and all that, like I don't question that he's genuinely coming at things and doing them for what he believes to be the right reasons. We don't always have to agree with every single method that every single one of us does, but I would find it would be quite shocking to me if Lachlan is acting in a way that is intentionally not above board. Let's put it that way. Okay, so I will say that for him based on his reputation and my dealings with him. Not saying that any of us are perfect. So again, I have to reserve judgment on that. Any other questions? Let's see. Has anyone else jumped in here? Ace says, have you reviewed any physical media sources like turntables, CD players? Many people swear they have superior properties to streaming. What are my thoughts? I have reviewed a couple of CD players slash were they transports or were they players? I think they're technically players because they have onboard DACs, but I have reviewed a couple of SMSL CD players, the PL 100 and PL 200. Does that sound right? I just moved one of them. Where did it go? Because I needed to make room on my. I see it right down here underneath the box. 1 second. This guy here, yeah. This is the SMSL PL100. Yes, I have reviewed this, and I want to say it's the PL200 that I also reviewed once upon a time. I have not done a whole lot of physical media reviews. No, I definitely have not done any turntables or vinyl. I mean, look at the mess behind me. Where am I going to put vinyl? So there's that. Now, my thoughts on the sound quality of, say, like playing CDs versus ripping a CD and then playing it like on a computer or through Rune because I'm a Rune user or something like that. That actually gets really hard to test, honestly, because there are a ton of variables in there. Um, I will say that I have heard both the CD transport, like when I use one of those CD players as a transport, or I go through Rune or something like that. They both can sound really amazing. I am not actually sure which one is better. I use files and streaming a lot because of convenience. Like I have a large local music library that's all like FLAC or DSD anymore. And then I also like what I don't have via local library that either was a ripped CD or a downloaded album. Um, I will supplement with streaming from Kobuz usually. I also have tended to. I'm not really a big album listener. I will say, like it's not never, but it's fairly rare comparatively that I will just start and play an album start to finish. I really am more of a track based and shuffle listener. That's just how I have developed as a listener over the years. So, because of that, files have been a lot more useful to me. And I have like a big playlist in Rune that I literally just call Shuffle This. That's the name of the playlist where it's got I can tell you how many tracks does it have in it. Um 3,677 tracks from a wide range of genres, and I just shuffle it. Some of it's local files, some of it's streamed, but that's the like when I listen to music more often than not, I just put something on my head and I hit shuffle on that playlist. So in terms of use, I have definitely gone files and streaming because of that. Paul says, it seems like if people disagree with a reviewer, the first thing they say is they are on the take in some way. That's a common one for sure. And that's one thing that Lachlan and I addressed in there is if they don't say that we're deaf or that our hearing is damaged, which is another common one, then yeah, we're on the take somehow. We're a shill, or however it is, we are somehow ethically compromised just because we don't agree. Um, and we tried to address that. I mean, some of it is just you've got to realize in this hobby, we are not all going to agree all the time, right? We've all got different preferences in terms of what sound, what aspects of sound matter to us. We definitely have different music preferences. Hey, and different musical genres do, sound different on different kinds of gear. So, yeah, I it's okay to like have different opinions on things, right? I mean, it should be. Is what it is. All right. Any other questions out there? If you guys have suggestions, like what is there anything that we reviewers can do to like get out ahead of and maybe this is just a stupid question. I don't know. Like is there any way for us to get out ahead of those knee-jerk claims that we are, as Paul puts it, on the take somehow? Or is that just a built-in part of the experience, which it could well be? I don't know. It just doesn't seem to be very helpful to anyone. Could well be one of those forms of thought terminating cliches that we led the show off with. All right. See, I'm trying to think. Oh, we have something here. Michael says, no, people are always going to react like that. They like the drama too much. Yeah, I suppose. Don't know if I can fully disagree with that, unfortunately. That was like one of those. See, what review was it? Oh yeah, it was the Hollow Bliss. That amp. I was not a huge fan of the Hollow Bliss, and I got private messaged on HeadFi by someone who I'm not going to name. Right. But they were deeply offended that I did not like the Bliss and sent me like a 5,000 word like semi dissertation on how wrong I was, citing all of the other reviewers that liked that amplifier. And I had to shut that down real quick and just say, no, this is not an appropriate way to respond. So I don't do that. Don't do that kind of thing. All right, let's see. Trying to think what else we got here. We've got the Thanksgiving holiday coming up, which, by the way, I'm doing my best to make sure there's going to be content over Thanksgiving holiday, at least Thanksgiving here in the United States, which is next week, Thursday already. I can't believe how fast it's coming up. Time just seems to be flying by. So the next podcast episode is going to drop on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. So that should be in your feeds for hopefully entertainment for the road for your Thanksgiving travels next week, Wednesday. So be on the lookout for that. That one is I talk with Michael from the Director's Garage, where we just kind of talk about like the nature and state of the top of the line headphone market. Okay, the high end stuff. Michael says Audivina re-review for Christmas. Uh yeah. Yeah, I just got that Audivina LE in, so I don't know if you meant re or LE, it doesn't matter. Okay. Maybe I'll get that done before Christmas. I don't know. I have a pile of so much gear in for review though. So I mean there's a lot to get to. And again, look behind me. It's coming in faster than I have places to put it. So, yeah, good problem to have, though, when you're doing this kind of work. Let's see. What else do we need to discuss here? Oh, we have a comment. Let's see. Re-review. Save the new model for the new year. Oh. Actually, I don't have the original Audivina anymore. I have the JM modded edition. Is John Masseria over at JM Audio. He, has done hi-fi min mods, and I was like, "Do you think you can save this one?" And he says, "I don't know, but I will try." So I sent that to him, and I actually reviewed that mod right there. The Reverend Doctor says he prefers the Edition XS over the XV. Okay. I can see that. Like, I just listened to the XV very briefly today for the first time, and only for about 3 songs. And it sounded different than I expected to. That doesn't mean that I thought it sounds bad. Okay. It's tuned differently than most hi-fi men's are. So if you're going into the Edition XV expecting a certain kind of sound, a hi-fi man sound, you're not going to get that, right? It's different. And again, I have that first impressions video that explains that a little bit more that I'll be releasing whenever we're done with this live stream here tonight. Let's see. Did I miss any comments? Oh, Ace said earlier he doesn't listen with graphs. He listens with his ears. Yep. Fair enough. Okay. Let's see. And that's always one of those because it's like being a scientist, I'm not anti-measurement and anti-data at all. It's just like it takes a lot of training and understanding to know how to properly use all of that stuff. And There's just there's a dearth of said training out there in our hobby. Let's just put it that way. Okay. Paul Gross wants to know, curious, what equipment type is the hardest to review and what is your favorite and least favorite? That's a good question. The type of gear that is most difficult to review. I'm going to have to think about that one. I've never actually thought about what's more difficult. Uh Generally speaking, I'll kind of give you like a categorization of things that get more difficult. Like the more difficult it is to swap between pieces of gear, the harder it is to review them. And I say that because like a core part of my reviewing method is to do comparisons, right? To try to do rapid A/B between things, so that like one, it's like I'm looking for like, is any given piece under review, like is it, are they asking a fair price for that? Right. And one of the best ways to determine that is, does it compete with products that are right around its same price, products of the same type that are right around its same price, right? And so like the ability to switch back and forth quickly is important there. So I have like switch boxes, like this one's not hooked up right now, but okay, I have like this XLR switch box. Like this is the in version. The out version just got put in there because on my desk right now I have the Matrix TS1 streamer DAC going into the ONA N7, which is under review, and the ONA S17 Pro Evo amplifier, because I need to compare those two, right? And so having a switch like this where you can go between things really helps. And like, do switches reduce the overall sound quality? They might very well, a little bit here and there, but if they do reduce sound quality, they do it by the same amount to everything that's plugged into them. So the comparative part there is is still useful there. But if you want to talk about things like I haven't yet, but if I were to review power cables, for example, that would be super tough unless you have two of the same unit and you can like plug a standard power cable into one and the fancy power cable into the other. Vacuum tubes. Now that I'm thinking about this, I finally got there. Vacuum tubes can be tough to review because you either need two of the identical like amp or DAC or whatever takes those vacuum tubes, so you can go back and forth in between, or you've got to do the long, slow swap between the two. So it just becomes more difficult to really tease out some of the subtle differences there. I've learned how to speed up, switching tubes out, like where you turn the amp off and you can actually pull the tube out and put a new one in much faster if you use this fancy new invention called an oven mitt. Okay. I learned that just like, oh yeah, I use an oven mitt in the kitchen to touch hot things. So I have on occasion raided the kitchen drawer, brought an oven mitt down so I could pull a hot tube out and then get a second hot pad so I could put it down on a table. Okay. But yeah, so those kinds of things where it's not easy to switch back and forth are the hardest to review. I hope that made sense. Got there in a roundabout sort of way. Favorites and least favorite. I guess I assume that was in the category of like what's difficult to review, and that gets really specific. Just vacuum tubes that we were talking about there. Like, just I'll give you a quick example. My favorite 6SN7 vacuum tube that I have found is the Nas New Old Stock Sylvania VT231 from like the mid 40s. Sylvania made military grade vacuum tubes, like through like there were like two runs of them, one in 44 and one in 45, that are just absolutely wonderful. Um, and so I've bought a few of them and have them extra in reserve because they are so good. Okay. Let's see. We had a couple more comments come in here. The Reverend Doctor says DACs are most difficult. I have not generally found that to be true, depending on how it's set up. Like, I have found ways to make it easier to review DACs by having DDCs with multiple digital outputs, for example, like the Singer SU6, the Vice Engineering INT 204 that I just did a review for recently, etc. Those have like multiple coaxial outputs on them, or in the case of the SU6, it's got multiple I squared S outputs on it, that sort of thing. So like that allows me to connect, two DACs to the same digital source, knowing that they're getting basically the same quality digital signal. Right. And then through a switch box, I can switch through them pretty quickly. Now, if I didn't have that kind of stuff, then yeah, I can see why DACs would be quite difficult. Okay. Let's see. Michael says, in general or personally, question mark. I would think for the most difficult would be IEMs because of the comfort issue I mentioned. Yeah, I would say that reviewing IEMs is like not necessarily difficult from a sound perspective, though. It's like no more or less difficult than a headphone review. But the my amount of enjoyment in reviewing such a thing is a little bit lower because of the comfort issue that you bring up there. Now that said, there are still some use cases where IEMs are just the best way to go, and so what's interesting about IEM reviews, even though I don't do them very often, is that I can kind of do them in parallel to other gear reviews in a way that I can't do with other gear reviews. Like um, something that can get me really backed up in my review queue and just take a while to work through it all. Not because they're difficult to do, but because it really can only do one at a time, is open back headphones in particular. Because open back headphones, I basically have to use here at my main listening setup here at my desk, right? Because most places, other places I could use them, they're generally bothering somebody, right? So like IEMs, I can do parallel because I can use them so many other places. So in terms of the ability to do IEMs, I would actually argue that they're easier, just again because they are more broadly useful in more areas of life. All right. The Reverend Doctor says, got its first DDC yesterday, the Duke Audio, but need to test it today. Oh, you're sick. I'm sorry to hear that. Get well soon there, buddy. Okay. By the way, Reverend Doctor, I do appreciate your kind words on basically every review. I see you out there and I appreciate it. For those of you who may not know, the Reverend Dr. Thomas there comments on just about every review I put out that just says thank you. And I appreciate that. So, Reverend Doctor, thanks a lot. All right. Let's see. Anything new come in? Nope, no new comments yet. Okay. Oh, here's one. Paul says, I think you mentioned you rarely EQ headphones. I think Lachlan is the same. Why is that? Uh, yeah. So actually, this is way back to the very first podcast episode I did with Mark from Super Reviews when we talked about EQ. But the long and the short of it is the biggest reason that I don't EQ is because managing EQ and using it is a pain in the butt. Okay. And like being in my position as a reviewer, it takes that pain in the butt and multiplies it multiple times over. Because if I set up an EQ, then I listen to something, and if I don't remember to like turn off that EQ, then the next thing that I go to put to listen to, which is probably something different, Okay, I'm like, wow, this sounds weird. What's going on here? And it turns out that the problem was is I forgot to turn off that EQ from the previous listening experience, or I have the EQ all set up on one chain, but now I need to check that headphone or that amplifier or whatever with a different DAC or with a different amp or just in a different signal chain somehow. And now that EQ doesn't carry over so well, right? So that's one reason. Um, Reason number two is like to me part of the fun of the headphone hobby, at least the headphone side of this audio hobby, is that different headphones sound different. You get different sound signatures. Um, different collections. So if you have a warm sounding headphone for your rock and heavy metal, and then you've got a neutral headphone for your classical, and then you have something that's a little bit more, say, mid forward for a cappella music or acoustic, acoustic singer songwriter type stuff, whatever the case may be, right? Like you've got those different options in there, and like one of one of the realities of EQ is that it homogenizes the listening experience from headphone to headphone. Now, to some people, that's the point, is that headphones should just sound a certain way. And so you EQ to a target to make them all sound close to the same. I am definitely not a believer that you can EQ any headphone to sound exactly like any other headphone, because I think there are aspects to our hearing that are beyond frequency domain information in there. Okay. But there is a homogenization in getting the tones, the tonalities to be pretty much the same. Okay. So I enjoy the differences in the gear is another answer to that. There are a couple of reasons, but yeah, episode one of the podcast series is about EQ. There, Paul. You can go back and listen to that there. I don't know what Lachlan's take is on that. I imagine it's probably similar, but you'd have to ask him that question. Okay, a couple of other comments came in here. The Reverend Doctor says, "You are the finest reviewer in the hobby." Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Um, and he says, I normally EQ earphones, not headphones. Though I often hit X bass with headphones. X bass, that's what Hi-Fi calls their bass boost, right? I believe so. Yeah. Um, yeah, that can make sense because like, IEMs, you said earphones. I'm not sure if you meant IEMs there or just like, AirPod kind of things that are like the earbuds that just kind of sit there. Um, IEMs, okay. Or that could be Hi-Fi. I'm not sure. There's a delay. Okay. They are generally are tuned different. The bass boost on headphones, I get that too. Like some headphones are just a little bit bass light. Sometimes bass boosts help, sometimes they don't, right? Not every headphone can handle a bass boost, I have found too. Not every amp can drive every headphone with a bass boost either. Yeah. What was it? It's been a long time now. Mm, yeah. It was the first Hi-Fi Zencan amp. This is going back a way. So this had to be like 2020 or 2021, somewhere in there. I got one of those Hi-Fi Zencan amplifiers, and it had one of those bass boosts on it. And then I went to plug in my Sen HD6XX in there with the bass boost on that thing, and there was a lot of distortion in the bass, right? It just like that, it couldn't handle that headphone in the low end. But of course, that was a very much like an entry level balanced amplifier, for 5 years ago now. So the newer versions probably are a little bit cleaner on that. I hope. I haven't heard like the more recent Zen cans. Okay. What do we have here? Let me scan the comments real quick, make sure I haven't missed anything. And somebody, if you have a new question, please jump in there and ask it. All right. Looks like we have used up the comments there. Paul, I thought of another thing about that EQ. When I did EQ back years ago, I used that equalizer APO for Windows. It had the Peace GUI on it, and this could be different now because I haven't used it in years. And that would just be that every time Windows updated, that equalizer APO broke, and you had to like uninstall and reinstall it, and it was such a pain. All that. All right. Okay, Paul also wants to know, is graininess in the high the fault of the music, DAC, amp, or headphones? Hmm. Yes. Right? If I understand what you mean by graininess in the highs, which there's a lot of ways to interpret that. Um, could be like you're talking about sibilance or just a general lack of smoothness in the high frequency response of sound, and treble accuracy. Reproducing treble accurately is difficult. Okay, it is. So is it the recording, the music itself? Is it the deck, the amp, or is it the headphones? It could be any and all of those things, or a combination. So if we start at the transducer level, if we start from the ear and then just work up the chain from there, okay, high frequency information is a challenge to reproduce. Why? Well, when you start talking about high frequency stuff, like let's say the treble range, um, there's going to be argument on this, but the treble range probably starts around the 4 kilohertz range and up. Where exactly that delineation is not really the point here. The point, though, is what does that mean? Like, what does 4 kilohertz or 5 kilohertz or 6 kilohertz really mean? Okay, remember that with sound frequencies, which we perceive as pitch, what we're talking about is if you let a vibration happen for a full second, that number of hertz is the number of times that the driver membrane will have to move back and forth in a second. Now, it's very rare in music that you get a full second long tone. Okay, in real music, it's often a lot quicker than that. All right, but that doesn't mean that the sound wave that is made there doesn't have a frequency that could be 4 kilohertz, 5 kilohertz on up. Okay, so with treble, you are asking a piece of physical material to vibrate back and forth thousands of times per second. So I mean, just stop to think about that for a minute and just think about like how difficult that's got to be to do accurately to start with. Right? Like, I mean, one of the reasons there are so many different ways to make drivers out there, and then there are so many different variations within the different driver type categories, is because they're trying to find ways to like move with um those frequencies, like to move back and forth in those vibrations and match the signal right there when you've got talking about a thing that is moving back and forth literally thousands of times per second. On top of that, okay, and this is where like single squiggly lines on frequency response graphs are limited. Okay, and that's because a real music signal is going to say have 100 hertz information, which means in a headphone where you have a full range driver, okay, the membrane, the driver membrane, the cone or the planar membrane or whatever is going to have to start moving back and forth 100 times per second to get that 100 hertz tone. Okay, and then If you have a cymbal crash on top of that, now maybe you've got some 4 or 5 kilohertz information on top of that. So that 4,000 hertz or 4 kilohertz information has to vibrate back and forth while the driver is also moving back and forth 100 times per second. So I did this in a video once. I think it was a topping review, A90D or something like that, where I likened this to doing a bench press, right? A nice clean sound wave, like on a bench press, is just a nice smooth down to your chest and back up. A real world music wave, though, has those small little vibrations of high frequency information on top of the big vibrations. That's like the fundamental frequencies of things. So it's like trying to do a bench press like this with all kinds of random movements and motions as you're going up and down. That's what moving a speaker or headphone driver is really like. And that's why it's hard. So before you even get to matters of seal, okay, with a speaker, before you get into even room reflections, any of those things, just getting the driver to move in response to the signal is hard. Okay, it's hard, and that's why that's the start. Why treble is difficult. You're asking the driver to move a lot on top of other movements that are already happening. I hope that made sense. So then, like, another reason that treble is difficult, like in the electronic domain, though, is because, like, when you think about a 5 kilohertz tone, you've got those 5,000 wiggles of an electromagnetic wave going on there. If you've got any kind of noise in your electronic, in your signal chain, which everybody does, there is no signal chain that has zero noise. Okay. It's just a matter of how much the noise is there and how much it affects things. It starts to mess with the smallest of the wiggles first. Where are the small wiggles? In the treble. Okay, through wave superposition. That's what gets affected the most proportionally right out of the gate. All right. Let's see. All right, let's see. Arneseth3814 says, "Get Ed from Old Guy Hi-Fi on your podcast. Very knowledgeable on both analog and digital electrical engineering and with a different perspective than Golden Sound. Cables do make a difference, etc." Okay, Old Guy Hi-Fi. Ed from Old Guy Hi-Fi. All right, I'll write that down. Never talked to him. Ed from Old Guy Hi-Fi. All right. Paul says, "Great explanation. Thank you. You're welcome. I have Meze 109 Pros running off of Mac as the source, Mimir and Pietus Maximus, and trying to tame the graininess when when the multiple high notes come together in some rock songs." Okay. Yeah. So with a lot of rock music, it is the recording too, unfortunately. There is some well recorded rock out there. There's a lot more not as well recorded rock out there. And some of the same influences that we just talked about happen on the recording end, right? Because like you get the electronics and all of that going on in there, and they can mess up some of the finer gradations of treble. Sometimes care needs to be taken when you match a microphone to a vocalist. If you have a certain singer who likes to get like right up on the microphone and then they have sharp S's and T's in their delivery, you want to get a warmer sounding mic that's a little bit friendlier in the treble. But sometimes those mics aren't available in a studio at the time that that recording needs to be made. Or maybe the engineer who's overseeing that doesn't know of that combination yet. There's just all kinds of factors in there. And then some kinds of rock music in particular, they're not supposed to sound good. Sounding bad is kind of the artistic side of it. Okay. I don't know if you listen to this, but like black metal, for example, for the metalheads out there, often sounds terrible because it's supposed to. Okay. As one example. Though with Mimir and Pietus Maximus, that's a pretty good, pretty smooth, controlled uh combination there. I would imagine, let's see, Meze 109s. The 109 Pro is bright. Um Paul, I don't know if you are still using the stock Meze cable on that 109 Pro. If you are, that one's got some sharpness to it. For whatever reason, that particular cable does get very sibilant. And I know this is controversial for a lot of people, but if you just switch out that cable to like a basic Heart or audiophile Ninja cable, it's going to clean up the treble delivery on that headphone nearly instantly. Oh, you did upgrade. Okay. Gotcha. Now the 109 is a brighter headphone, period. That could be a factor. And you use Heart cables, okay. Let's see. The Head D1, I know it's brand new, but boy, does it have a buttery smooth treble on it. A really buttery smooth treble. That Head D1 is really good. I think it came through in my review that I liked that one a lot. Trying to think where else in your chain you might be having an issue. Yeah. Sometimes if you're using a really super cheap and generic USB cable, that can have an issue or can be an issue sometimes. I was surprised by how much warmer and cleaner just going to an Audio Quest Forest USB cable was over just like the included USB cables that often get shipped with gear. That's another thing you could look into as well. All right. We have Shabby Gag here. Second wave. Second wave of what? Anyway, thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. All right. Let's see. Going a little bit quiet in the comments here. Where did we leave off? Oh, here we go. Try some. Okay, you'll say you'll try some other cables. I am very interested in the Head D1, but concerned with lower bass response. Okay. Don't remember low bass response being an issue on the D1, but yeah, let's see. Tom is here. Thanks for being here, Tom. 15K subs, baby. Yep, that's right. Just rolled over 15K on Monday. Okay. It's moving on up. Channel is growing, exciting times. Working hard, but having a lot of fun. Let's see. What is my current sub count? I can look at that real quick while we're here. 15,032. Yep. Creeping upward still. All right, let's see. Make sure I didn't miss any comments again. I think I have seen most of them. Paul, what do you mean by you're concerned with the deep bass, the lower bass response? And actually, Michael here does make a very good point. You could also look into the Murph 1. Okay, Murph Designs Murph 1, because the bass extension on that thing is fantastic. It digs really deep. Been a long time since I had the Meze 109 Pro in, but the more recent Meze dynamic drivers They kind of struggled with like that Hans Zimmer track, Why So Serious, for example. I don't remember if I tested the 109 on that or not. It's been a long time since I had the 109 in. Let's see. All right, we are getting close to an hour here. So let's we got any other questions that come in? Questions, comments, etc. Doesn't Murph have a new headphone out too? Anyway, look at that. All right. Paul says the Meze 109 bass is pretty strong and deep. I saw a few comparisons to the Sennheiser headphones, which I find dull and boring. Next to the 109, yeah, I can see that. Particularly because the 109s they are brighter, which can help with like some of the experience or the excitement in there, and yeah, can make some Sennheisers sound a little bit dull. I can definitely see where you're coming from on that. All right. Michael Ever the Troll says, "When's the episode with Joe on rebuilding burnt bridges getting filmed?" I assume you mean Joe from Abyss there. I don't know. No talk on that one. Do the D1s have more life to them? I did not have any problems with their dynamics or anything like that. They never sounded dull to me. They are warm. Like if you're equating brightness with like excitement and like not sounding dull, then the D1 could sound a little bit dull to you, but I don't think they're dull in a dynamic sense in any case. No. All right. Give you guys about another minute or so to see if any more questions come in. And again, whenever this wraps up, you can stand by for a couple more minutes. Uh, because I will be releasing for members anyway a first impressions video about those 4 new Hi-Fi Min headphones that just came in. The Ananda unveiled the Audivina LE Edition XV and HE600. Okay. D1 with Pietus, too much of a warm thing. That could be. You have put together a pretty solid chain for checking the 109's brightness. If you're still noticing some treble graininess there, um a good chance it's probably from the recordings, or it could be on the digital front end. uh Another thing you might want to try there, Paul, is to pick up one of those. Oh, I'm blanking on the name. Somebody help me out here. Those $50 USB filters from JDS Labs. What are those called? The Synapse. Synapse, spelled Synapse. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Michael. Um, There's like 2 versions of that. Well, it's the same version. It's like $79 if you want a metal case, $49 if you want a 3D printed case in there. And I have a couple of them in. I need to get a video out about them But they do seem to help clean up some USB noise issues and all of that. So you can also try that and see if that helps smooth out some of the trouble for you as well. That's a rather inexpensive way to go as well. All right, folks. Anything else this evening? What do we give here? You'll give that a try. Yep. You're welcome. Let me know how it goes. I do have a couple of those around now, and probably getting close to a point where I can get a video filmed about that and get that out there. All right. Give you about another minute or two to see if any other questions come in. All right. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up then. Thanks to all of you who are in the comments and asking questions. All right. And you are welcome, Reverend Doctor. It is my pleasure. Thanks for being here. It's probably middle of the night where you are. And you are welcome, Paul. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your great questions. All right. And so forth. Thanks again to all of the audience out there. All right. We'll go ahead and call that a stream then. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good night and enjoy the music.